blank page. Okay, we're good. All right, welcome everyone. This is a workshop to a request to councillors to a response to a paper that came to council around the reserves contributions policy that staff have got under development. So there was quite a lot of questions and uncertainty around what was in and what was out and how that would work in practice. So a workshop was determined as the best way forward. So that's what today is about. There's a slide deck that's been shared with you all on Diligent. So feel free to look at it there if that's easier. Otherwise it'll be on screen. Note, Councillor Grafton is on his way. He's held up with farming duties for a wee bit unexpectedly, so he's on his way. And note, Councillors Reedy and Webb online.
And I'll just put an apology in for Graham. I doubt he'll be attending, but he might zoom in.
So apology from Graham as well. And that's all I've heard from at this stage. Okay, so we'll jump into it. I assume, Brent, you're going to take us through this, or so we've got Brent and Bronwyn from our policy team here.
Yeah, so we'll sort of tag team this. Bronwyn's going to start with the overview and where we've come from.
So you will remember that I think it was in June we put a paper to the meeting regarding the use of the reserve contribution fund. The reserve contribution fund being the money that comes from subdividers who per lot they can be required to contribute to reserves for a particular purpose. So where am I looking? Resource Management Act. So this is where it all starts. The Resource Management Act allows council to require financial contributions for reserves where necessary to achieve one or more of the following purposes. So section 108 provides creating open space, including recreation areas, visual buffers and amenity areas through reserves contributions, adding capacity to or otherwise enhancing existing open spaces. That includes recreation areas, visual buffers and amenity areas through reserves contributions, or giving public access to coastal areas, reserves, bush areas, or areas of special character through reserves contributions. So that is what the resource management allows council to do. So given that, our district plan, our current district plan provides for financial contributions to be required for some subdivisions. And that is one of the reasons we can levy financial contributions is for the provision of open space, public recreation and other reserves. So that's along with all the other sorts of financial contributions which are more around heavy infrastructure. Now the purpose, because the district plan has to have a purpose for what we put in it, it's to upgrade public recreational space and other reserves with facilities for public recreation and the enjoyment or the protection of conservation values where the subdivision results or will result in an increase or an intensification of the use of land, whether by increased resident population or by commercial or industrial activities. So that's, yes, Joe.
And just a clarification of that. So when they say public recreational space, is that just any public land or does it have to be a designated recreation reserve? So just to clarify how broad is that?
It has to be BBC owned land, whether it's declared and lodged with LINZ as a reserve, or we've got examples of, corner sections, etc., that are just BBC owned property that may not be specifically designated as a reserve.
So we could include road reserve or something like this because we're looking like the access.
We don't use any of these funds on road reserves. It would more be
but it could be if somebody wanted car parking or some of that road reserves place or something like that. Because it's around access. So
yeah. we might struggle with some of those things. Although I haven't certainly haven't seen any road reserve in particular.
So it's more that open space that currently we might own as fee simple land. And if we're talking about access, it may be through some land that we own or that we have control over. Yes.
Just to give an example, like when we had a consultation with the Charleston area, they expressed a big desire to have car parking area. So a lot of that area, whether the car parking area is probably public land, but probably road. So
Mix of road reserve, BDC, parking, being adopted.
So, just when we're having this policy, I'm trying to think of some of the uses we want to put it to, and would that apply? Could we use
I
that?
think we'll dig down into that because it comes up later, but basically we can only spend this reserves contributions on capital items on BDC owned land.
For purposes for public recreation or access.
So your car park may fit that.
So the purpose and use, look at that. The principles that we have that are established in both law and in the practical day-to-day use is it must be public expenditure, capital expenditure. So that means it has to be a capital project, not an operational and not a maintenance project. It's for upgrading, improving and enhancing public recreation space, open space and reserves, for creating new open spaces, creating access to open spaces. And the examples of upgrades that when we went through for the legal opinion, which was attached to that report in June, examples of upgrades that they gave were replacing old playground equipment, planting out native trees, fencing off rugby fields, landscaping footpaths, walking tracks. So that's the sort of thing that we're looking at, and it should be in the vicinity of the subdivision from which the contribution came. It's intended to address intensification.
Councillor Webb?
Linda.
Just a question on the upgrade, like, thinking about like a hall, for instance, and they're like, oh, we want to enhance and improve our building by adding a deck and a opening door where there was a window or something. Is that classed as an upgrade or is that maintenance?
To completely agree with Linda, a new deck, that's a capital item.
Okay.
Capital item is something that's enduring, will last beyond typically 3 to 5 years if it's going to last longer than that. A new door, if it's replacing an existing one, it's actually classed as repairs and maintenance.
But if there was no existing one, they cut a hole and put a door going out to the deck, that's an upgrade.
Yeah, it's a little tricky, and we'd go to finance on that one because there's does it improve the capital value of that facility or not? I mean, the same argument basically on a roof renewal. If you replace the roof, there's an argument that it's extending the life of that asset and improving its capital value, but there's also a counter argument that is repairs and maintenance of a roof that is its usefulness.
Okay. Two grey areas.
So, as they arrive.
Yes, so it's not a normal sort of interpretation of upgrading, and it certainly has to exclude any semblance of maintenance.
Yeah.
The fund balance. Oh yes, that's the reading.
Thanks for that. I just heard the comment before from Brent that it's BDC owned property only. Is that, did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, now what we have is a situation, and I'm happy to be corrected on this, whereby a subdivision, for example, can, instead of a financial contribution, make land available for for a park or recreational activity. Now, normally that would be, I suppose, gifted to BDC in some form or other in lieu of a financial contribution. So technically it becomes BDC owned property, but I'm not sure the legal implications there, but if the subdivider does provide that option, non-financial, then surely we will be we would take responsibility for that particular land
If
of
it's,
the non-monetary financial contributions.
yes, if it is in lieu of financial contribution for the open spaces, then it is also for the planners to decide whether or not that land is useful. And if it was deemed to be the appropriate way to provide for that financial contribution, then it would become vested in council, officially vested on. And I think the normal term is it goes into the Gazette and it's vested on subdivision, completion of the subdivision. Yes, Councillor Reilly.
Oh, yeah, and yeah, I hear you in that regard. Agree entirely. Just the comment before about car parking. Car parking, I don't believe is open space and the like. It is something that would be the responsibility of a developer. And can I just have some clarification on that, please?
Yes, we have an example. The Carter's Beach Hall had TIF funding for car parking outside the hall. It was I think a $50,000 project, half funded by TIF, half funded by council. And that certainly meets the criteria. So you're not providing car parking for the subdivision, you're providing car parking for a public space on council land.
It's quite nuanced, isn't it?
It is.
You vary horses for courses, and
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Tony.
Yeah, for example, say off the back for what Joe was saying, Mokanui, it's got no place for parking for beach access. So there is road reserve, which is BDC owned land. So to me, that kind of would fit what you're using a recreational space. It's next to a domain. It's for beach access, that kind of thing. If you were looking at adding it all up, to me, that seems like a fair and reasonable use of land.
It would be providing access to open
Yeah,
space.
which is
And that in that it would come together, but Simon.
Yeah, to utilise road reserve requires specific rules. Obviously, it needs clearance from various stakeholders, but the critical thing around road reserve is not restricting access. So parking, as long as there's public access through the road reserve, potentially could be used. It comes down to sometimes road reserve is way too wide for an actual road reserve anyway. So I think horses for courses, if there's room and capacity, should be okay.
Because there is actually quite a lot of big blocks of road reserve. It's actually a pain because that has to be mowed and maintained and stuff like that. So yeah, just don't take it off the list as a no.
Yes.
So you mentioned that the money is to be used in the area that it's been taken from. Is that legislation or is that just a rule that we're going to put?
It's basically, the legislation is quite wide. But however, it does in our district plan, if we just go back to that one. So the district plan actually says where the subdivision results or will result in an increase or intensification of use of land, whether by increased resident population or commercial or industrial. That's the part that implies that the increased population that is created by that subdivision will in some way be served by the use of the fund.
But it only implies
It
it's not their shall.
No, it's not.
No.
No, some district plans do.
Is that one of the things we're talking about today? I noticed later in the slide that you looked at Piper example, I think.
Yes.
Yep.
Is that something you're looking at putting in black and white? Possibly.
Great.
Great.
Right.
more black than the white.
Right.
It is at the moment.
Councillor Weston.
Thanks, yeah, just to expand on Joe's thing, like with the OMAR upgrade for that whole corner, there's obviously going to be some tickle ups with the road reserve and the domain and everything like that, because the whole road's going to be the main road and all that sort of thing, like the lighthouse, and so that will free up reserve land.
And certainly that's a really good example of the developer coming to us and saying, look, there's a $1 million road, realignment, et cetera, being done. But to scale that back to fit within the funding criteria, some things were dropped off the initial plan, and landscaping was one of those. So we had the developer actually ask, well, we're putting in a fair chunk of financial contribution, can't that be used for landscaping? And that is one we would have to dig down on as to whether that would fit the brief. It certainly seems to tick the boxes for legislation, but that's another example of you know, where we can't say to a developer, we're gonna, you know, our policy, because we don't have one, says we will do this in your area. We can actually, at the moment, those funds can go basically anywhere. So have developers basically questioning, where's the benefit? So it's their property guys.
Right.
Okay.
Crack on.
So currently, as at 31st of July, the fund was at 1.6 million. 1.6 million with 673,000 100,000 allocated to projects. That's at half our funding, leaving $936,000 available. That's at that date there. You want to take people through this one?
Oh, the next one, right? So, I think Rosie actually asked a question. It was a really good one. How's this fund been accumulated? And we had to go back roughly over 5 years to get to around that $1.6 million figure. And so that breaks down by location how much has been paid by developers in or around those regions. There is a little bit of, and I think we picked up on that in the paper, where we'd allocated some powerhouse stuff to Waimangaroa, because we looked at, you know, where's the nearest town or settlement. There was some down the end of Utopia Road, etc., which we put into Westport or whatever. But as a broad brush, that's where the bulk of or where that funding has come from. I've also put out another column in there, so it's allocated. Where have we spent money in the last, and this is about 2 years worth, and it's basically been used to offset the funding, tourism infrastructure funding. You'll note Mokanui is in there at 300,000. That project's still ongoing. We suspect that's where it's going to land. So it may be a little bit, we may have slightly more than that.
Joe?
Clearly, you've got Punakaiki at 0, but in the previous broader spreadsheet you sent out earlier, Punakaiki had about 600,000. So I would have thought there's been a subdivision there. Why is it got nothing?
Spreadsheet out to look at that. I'll have to go back, but Punakaiki wasn't in that previous spreadsheet that I had. I think it might be Omea was over.
I might be, my memory might be wrong, but I would have thought, probably back further than 5 years, but there has been little subdivisions there. I would have thought it had a little bit of bucket.
Yeah, Punakaiki, not so much, not the last 5 years. Okay.
Yeah, just a question, like out at Nikau, I know Mokanui, Annan said, well, there has been some subdivision out there over the years.
Yeah.
Why isn't that noted on here?
As I said, I've only gone back through the last 5 years and
Yeah.
pulled out every contribution.
Right.
Like, went line by line. So some of those may have been under the limit,
Right.
like because it's only triggered at a certain value or a certain number of sections.
Yeah.
So they may have just swooped under the threshold.
Yeah.
Don't they sometimes trade off paying to this for by surrendering a Esplanade strip and things like that?
Sometimes it's not actually that often. We've only had one in the last 2 years where that's been a thing, and typically, you know, not throwing developers under the bus, but it's usually the piece of land that isn't worth anything, that they'll try and get some council, so we typically won't take that on if it's gonna, because there's always a cost to it. That land that's been invested will need mowing, might need fencing or whatever, like we said, if there's value in that land, I think typically the developers keep it.
Well, push it up.
Just to get back onto Tony's ones for the smaller subdivisions, we talked about it at one stage about there being a loophole there. Is that a case of some of them?
So there is
It's a limit.
there's a limit. So if you've got a section, you can put a secondary house on it, and that's fine. There is, you don't have to apply for a subdivision, or pay any penalties for that. And it has been a case where people have put a second dwelling on it and said, no, we'll never subdivide it, and then within days of that house being completed, there's a subdivision applied for. That is, but you know, I don't know how you would close that loophole. It's quite common. It's not, you know, unique to Westport or followed by any stretch of imagination. It's a nationwide problem.
If you do a subdivision, why don't you have to pay a reserves contribution?
Because it's triggered by the value of the section being created.
And the number of the
and the
sections.
number of lots on it,
Yeah.
on that subdivision. So there are instances of people buying a large piece of land, putting a second dwelling on it, cutting that section in half. Now we've got another section, let's put another house on there. It's a slow way of creating development. But if you want to avoid paying those fees, I don't know that avoiding paying the fees is the main reason for it. But you say you had a hectare of land, you chopped it in half with 2 houses, then those 2 houses can be chopped further again and further again, you know, 1 house at a time. I don't know how you would prevent that. Pardon me? Right.
So I'll just clarify that with the district plan. So the maximum amount of contribution where over 10 allotments are created, land suitable for development into a reserve to serve the expected population. For each additional allotment of less than 1 hectare, the amount of financial contribution shall be 7.5%. For each additional allotment, then 1.5%. So it's based on the number of allotments that are created. And that's how it is in the current district plan and the TTPP. I know financial contributions are also included. Exactly, right.
Right.
Yeah, just on that, Brent, with that, like that guy put a dwelling on there and then another dwelling. So what happens if they put a stormwater pipe out to the main thing? Is that, yeah, so that, and that's too big for what's going past their section? Or if any, yeah.
It's a constant issue. Yeah, so typically if we suspect that is going to infiltrate the subdivision, the infrastructure services team will say, we want separate connections. We want them upside, that there's room behind. If we think there's room for intensification, we'll want. Yeah, generally now, any house, any subdivision or any potential splitting of land, it will be separate connections to each dwelling, water, sewer, stormwater, and provision if we think they're going to scale up.
Okay.
Okay.
So the current process for use, so that's what we're basically talking around. We're talking about not the way that we collect it or how much we collect, but the way that we use it. So the current process is the annual plan submission and application process to council. That's how funds are currently distributed since around 2018. Council has assigned the funds to applications from the community if the use is aligned with the fund's purpose. The outcome from the current process, as we see it, I guess, is that there are community-led projects, but they tend to be one-off. There are unplanned works that can occur during the year, which need to be delayed if we want to use a reserve contribution fund, because it would require going back to through the annual plan process. The process is not very well understood. I mean, in terms of the community, and some groups just don't apply for funding because they don't understand how it works at that annual plan stage. And I guess the last one is that BDC is unable to quickly respond to co-funding opportunities when they come along during the year. So, sorry, yes, Joe.
So how would that be different if you had a 6 monthly allocation? Though there's still going to be this co-funding that's going to come in between. And at the moment, we still have even though it's an annual plan process, we've still got the ability to come to any meeting and put a proposal forward. So isn't there that flexibility in the current system? Maybe the problem is we're just not planning well and ensuring these community wants are thought through. It doesn't sound to me as if we are actually restricted under the current process.
I think one of the issues around the one-off projects is that they are allocated to the group that comes to council. So the groups that come to council who know how to use the system are able to stand before council and put their case forward, and they're often very good cases. What we are asking is whether or not we need a policy that is a little bit more structured, that gives some more eligibility criteria. The big one, I guess, and it's the elephant in the room, is the reserve management plans. The reserve management plans will be planned in we're talking about end of the year, I think, end of the year. So that has a big policy element in the front, setting out all the reasons why, the reasons how, and then for each of the reserves, not just the subcommittee, for ones that have subcommittees, but all of the reserves within council boundaries will have some goals and objectives. And at the moment, we don't have that. So when a project is presented, we don't have that to fall back on. For example, if somebody came to us about Victoria Square and said that they wanted to put a children's bouncy castle on it permanently, and we would look back at, we have nothing really to reference apart from the fact it's normally used for rugby and track and those sort of things. The reserve management plan will put in some goals and objectives for Victoria Park, and you will have reference back to those. I guess that will tidy up that side, and then I think what we're trying to achieve is just tidying up the next phase, which is the allocation and the eligibility through having a policy. We may not even need a policy, but that's what we're asking you today.
So I'll ask this question because it's probably one that Councillor Reedy will want to ask, and he might want to anyway. But Councillor Reedy's often referred to things that crop up during the year that weren't included in our annual plan, and how have we tested the public's appetite or otherwise of whatever that is. And I guess that's the challenge with this 6 monthly option to add is kind of the not transparency in a sinister way, but that these things are cropped up and haven't been, no one's really had a, where have they come from kind of thing. Yeah, I get that that's the reality sometimes of these funding opportunities, because they open with like a 2-month window to get a smart application in, and we don't necessarily, it's madness if we sit on our hands because we didn't know about it 6 months ago. But
I think that's where the reserve management plan comes in that it is going to have full consultation, public consultation, and it will be reviewed on a regular basis. So the consultation for the general direction of that reserve will be tested during that public consultation phase. Then when the project comes up, what we would suggest is that staff are then able to go through the eligibility and to present council with a better reasoned case for why something might, or why a particular project might fit within there, or why it doesn't.
okay, yeah, no, I get that. That's good. Lifts it up a level.
Yeah.
Tony, then Joe.
I think this is kind of where it all stems from. It appears to be very ad hoc, you know,
Yep.
and I think it's because we've been longing for these reserve management plans for a long time, because it's been left and left and left. And we haven't had a really good 100% scope of every asset that the district council owns, from playgrounds to reserves to like all the areas pretty much. So having that information, we can definitely be we can sort of see where things stand. And yeah, so I think that's been the missing link. This is why we're getting the whole ad hoc. Yeah.
And I think there's certainly opportunities for us to reduce rates, basically.
Yeah.
If you look at the LTP, take classic, the Waimangaroa toilet block, you know, needs some significant work. You know, that might be $30,000 or $50,000 in the next year or two to reclad or whatever. And actually, if we were to knock it over, you'd probably build a new one for not much more, around the same price, better spec, but and pay maybe 20 or 30,000 more. But rather than take that as a capital loan, that's the purpose of this. It's public amenities on BBC owned land. It's a capital item. We don't have to rate for it. We've got funding for it. So that it's those kind of things as well.
Joe was next, Nick.
I agree with that. The SPN are going to cure a lot of it, and they have public figures, so they're going to be a great price. But what about some of the areas that may be not captured under that? I'm just thinking community, where the community wants, but
Yeah, the
they
problem.
don't know how much child will be picked up. How much can we bring in the broader community things like the candies, the kindergarten facility groups, or voting wallet. So just I guess it may be part of consulting, but capturing some of those more than they're recognised.
And I think that again, it sort of helps us with that. If we had the 6 month lead like that, honestly, the LTP or the annual plan cycle started January fairly slammed for the 2 or 3 months leading up to that, actually compiling all our budgets, etc., etc. And that's why that proposed, 3 months lead, I think in March, September, is away from those busy times, away from that pressure of, spending money. And it'll give staff the opportunity to go out and talk to those communities, the Kierans and Joshuas, and say, what do you want? What, or they've had a meeting and said, we'd really like this, and we're like, oh, that's how we feel, but we have this is a funding opportunity.
I see there's not much that shouldn't, most of these are big picture visions of what a district wants, and most of them should fit into a yearly plan. That they're not really ad hoc within a year. Most of these are visions of what they want to see in the community. So other than the co-funding opportunities that come up, there shouldn't really be much that shouldn't be planned for outside the year. It's lost my mind. I'll come back to it. I had another thing I want to bring up.
This is where I just find 6 monthly is going to sort of confuse things a little bit. If everything is sort of in one spot, like the annual plan, long-term plan, whatever, and it's clear everybody has a similar opportunity as far as submissions, etc. go, but 6 monthly, I just feel quite uncomfortable, and we've had a policy, and I think change of management, of staff, councillors, the whole thing's just got sort of lost as if we'd tidied up what we had. And I just sort of feel this is a bit uncomfortable, most definitely over 6 months, because,
Tony, then to Colin.
So with reserve management plans, plus also too, our subcommittees have their full meeting once a year, and they sort of do their annual plan then. So you can it's another opportunity to capture longer term plan needs for upgrades or anything that they sort of see as improvements on the domain or, you know, that sort of area. So it's another area to pick up any sort of information around those areas.
Councillor Eddy?
Thank you. I'm hearing what Rosalie's saying regarding 6 monthly, but I'd like to, and the 30% and all that sort of stuff per year, which I'd like to discuss later. But at the moment, we're talking about having these reserve contribution fund, which people can then apply during the annual plan, long-term plan process. My understanding, even when we read the district plan, is that these contributions are made and are considered to be part of town planning, and that operationally, when you're developing a plan, when you're doing the town planning, you say, okay, we need to do this, we need to do that. There's an increased intensification as a result of a larger subdivision. We need to provide for recreational space out at, say, Omal, for example. And I don't see where anything in the legislation or in the district plan says that the fund is available for how can I say, submissions, if you like. Can you please provide some clarification?
Oh, Brent.
Okay.
No.
Okay. You're quite right, Colin. The reserves contribution fund has only really ever that I can see has been used on co-funding for some projects and some one-off stuff that over the last few years. And then, sorry, Rosie.
No, it's been used over the years for numerous things, and just, co-funding, it hasn't been used one hell of a lot for. It's just now, it has as the replanting, Victoria Square. It's being used for upgrades probably more than capital, and that's where it was needed, certainty was needed. 1 minute it would be capital, next minute it was upgrades, and it would depend on the interpretation of the people around the table as to what got funded. And this is where, you need something a little bit more sort of solid that this is what we are doing, not this time now and that time something different.
Right. So
But it's quite clearly most of it, well, that's how it's accumulated, because there hasn't been a lot of money spent over the years. And I think while we've got this total here of 1.6 million, it'd been sort of very good, and we did have it previously as to how much is raised, projected for the different years, because, you say, it just seems to be a panacea, this wonderful management plan. It's going to resolve everything, and we'll get everything sorted. But when you actually get to spend the money, how much money are we going to have to carry on over the years? Because it could be that much.
Simon V.
Yeah, just through your worship. We do have a budget line for expected revenue from financial contributions. I think we've got around 325 is the target for the next couple of years. 325, and that's to a certain degree a thumbs up, because taken on I suppose a history of those contributions, we had a budget line that was very low in terms of revenue. It was actually always exceeding it, so we've bumped it up quite a bit, at 150k this next budget.
So my question just carries on from Colin a little bit. So my understanding was how this, in my time anyway, how I always thought this was working, was effectively staff were deciding what projects had merit. So I mean, it was all on reserves, and they were applying the policy in the background and saying, look, hey, our team have assessed that the playground at XYZ needs a major refurb. It's 1970s style, rah, rah, rah. It hadn't really come from our community, and it hadn't really come from us. It was like, this has come up in our knowledge, doing our jobs operationally, And, we think it fits with reserves and it's just, so, you'll allocate your budget out of that, but we also need a bit of rating for it or whatever. That's how it was done. So when we talk about applications process, I think that's really more around it might influence us and staff's ideas on things that aren't on anyone's radar. But my expectation is that the playgrounds and parks and things that we currently maintain in that are already being managed by the team, and they're identifying, hey, there's a major upgrade needed here, and it meets reserves, and that's how we're going to budget for it. That's sort of how I thought it wasn't really like a community grants kind of application process.
I think that's where what's missing is that. Well, I've gone back to like 5 years, and those things aren't there. Those recommendations from staff to should be spending this, and what's actually happened is they've gone into a LTP as a net expense.
Yeah,
where it should actually be we want to use 50,000 out of this to put a new swing out at OMAP.
Yeah.
But we'd expanded this policy basically not just to cater for our identified projects that fit purpose, but also to give those community groups that might have a funding opportunity that's got a short window for application, but then to actually come in on top of that as well.
Okay. Tony, then Joe.
I think with this community applying for things, I think this kind of stems from the council not really knowing what they had out there.
Yeah.
So like our playgrounds hasn't been looked at. The council even know we actually have one here.
Yeah.
This is what they're applying for things to get fixed or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm not saying I can understand where Rosalie said, we can have this reserve management plan isn't going to fix everything. But I think the problem is that the council haven't, because they're so, I don't know why, for some reason they didn't even know where half of the assets were. And they've been left for so many years that now they're just, so that's kind of
We've
maybe
certainly
wrong.
picked up reserves, things we didn't know we had. 50%, a little bit unfair, it's probably 20, but no, you did right.
Joe.
A big amount of the money is going to be around the Westport area and out to Omar, up Elmer Road. We've had a very good process around the future Westport, both about what's going to happen around town as things change, but also what people want in the areas where the development's going to happen. But these aren't going to be things that are going to happen year by year. I can see we really need to retain a really good kitty around that Westport area too, because there's going to be quite big landscaping or X pathways or whatever. But the people have told us what they want in those areas. So that's where I don't like the idea of allocating so much each year, because I think some of these things are a bigger plan and we need to build up a fund to do them. And also I'm sort of wondering, like, when the flood walls finally get done, there's obviously going to be a bit of landscaping or access or other things that need to be incorporated there. So I think it's great that we have a fund locally, but I hate to see it just allocated out here and everywhere. That's where I'm saying we need a more strategic approach and a bit more long-term thinking.
Yeah, and we had that in our in the paper, as and honestly, those were just numbers that we went, oh, does this look about right? It was more about an element of protecting that fund. So there wasn't let's go to town and chew through this in 12 months and bleed it dry. I think there has to be some discipline around it, but I think that's the issue we have. So what is that? We're uncertain as to what we know what fits the criteria, but when we come to you and say there's $1 million there, we want to spend 200,000 here. Is it going to be, is that going to go down well, or we're sort of looking for some ground rules and parameters as well.
Same topic?
Well,
Okay.
that's it, we're cutting to the region here and we're gonna, if we agree with this 25 kilometres and that, it seems to me a really good annual plan process, because we can actually have a specific engagement with the community around, hey, these are all the things that we know from these other events that you want, and have that further engagement about what do you want done in your open spaces coming up.
Councillor Fowler?
Yeah, I guess, in the past, we said that it's come from council. In the last couple of years, that hasn't happened. Why hasn't that happened?
I can't tell you the answer to that. I've been in this role, just over a year,
Okay.
and, it was one of the first things I looked at.
As far as I can see, if we have like a reliable policy that shows the intention of council and where we vaguely want the money to go, and what we're trying to achieve by spending the money, then the annual plan seems a good idea, just to have a wee tweak, but otherwise let staff carry on and follow out the policy as it's intended. It doesn't always need to come back to council every time, I don't.
Yeah, I think the reality is it's not actually a policy, it's just.
So, yeah, all we have is the district plan guidance. That's what we have in terms of what we can use it on.
In the process of developing policy, is that right?
No, no. So what we're in the process of is developing that reserve management plans, which have a big front end policy and then individual reserves. But there is no other policy at this point in time, apart from the indications that are in the district plan.
Very cool.
Yes, Simon.
So the other side to this is we don't actually have a development contributions policy either. So this is an issue across the whole of the West Coast, not just for Buller. So how you use your development contributions, i.e. for road and water, etc. as well. But this is purely providing a guideline and for council to make sure it's actually used in the correct manner it should be used.
And in a thoughtful way, in a planned, strategic way. Each year.
You're next, Mr. Grafton.
Just, and I probably missed it, did just talk about the 25K?
No,
Oh, it's coming?
yeah.
Okay, let's work through a bit more of this then, of this thing.
Okay. So that's current process. So this was our thinking, and we saw it in the example that we had from Kaipara. The clarity for stakeholders, so they knew, we knew, councillors knew, the community knows how the process works. A clear purpose for the use of the reserve contribution fund, and a process. So set out how the mechanism, what mechanism for distribution, available funding, how much can be distributed, and where it can be distributed in terms of location. So this is the Kaipara example, which we took as a very wide, it's the only one we could find, and and we put our own spin on it, I suppose, looking at it from our district point of view. They have eligibility criteria, which is literally just the Resource Management Act and the district plan. They have their distribution, just location-wise, they've divided up into catchments, which are similar to their wards. They're not exactly their wards, but they divided the district up into catchments, and the policy says that 90% would be within the catchment from which the development contribution originated, and 10% could be district-wide. Those are basic numbers that they chose. They would set the amount every 3 years, so sort of long-term planish time. They would set the amount that each year they were going to either expect the maximum that they would spend out of the reserve fund. And the process was fully contestable in terms of the public. So the public came, there were applications, it was like a grants round. The public would make applications. Then they would, council would assess, the officers would assess them. There was a specific reserve contribution committee set up who deliberated on them, and they made those suggestions to council. Yes, Councillor Wet.
Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable with this, also with the TTPP and places like Knucklewalk or Ranity, all those areas that can't subdivide now, you know, so they're not going to get any of this money if that was a 25K. You know, I feel been a little bit, all these changes around, we can use our land. We still have parks and reserves and people actually living out there. So it would mean that we just always miss out.
So this was their example. That's they divided up into catchments. They didn't use the 25-kilometre thing, but they also made some available district wide. So that was that's maybe a balance, a different balance that you might like to see. You might want to go 80-20 or something, 70-30. But this, in terms of the district plan, was how it was, because people who come into that subdivision aren't necessarily always going to use the recreation facilities next to them. They might go somewhere else to use recreation facilities. So they still felt it fitted within the district plan provisions.
Councillor Reedy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just carrying on about that, what Tony's talking about. Now, if we go to, and I know the district plan is going to be merged into the TTPP, but if we go into 8.4.1.16 development contributions. Now, we talked before about the 500,000 developments of a value over 500,000, and the financial contribution shall only be spent by council on the provision and development of reserves, recreational facilities and community facilities within the district. Okay, very important that it says within the district. Then we go on to the other part where it says, under the same clause, basically, where a development occurs, additional contribution over and above that provided for above may be required to provide for the social and recreational needs of the area around which the development is located. Okay, so here we are trying to sort of put a ring fence 25K, but the reality is, in your plan, you have said that it will be used within the district. And that, for me, as I said before, is part and parcel of your district plan. Oh, sorry, of your planning, town planning, as they used to call it back in the day. So I think it's very specific in 8.4 that there's no percentages or anything like that. The monies that are received from a developer, of course they're going to pay that money because it just gets added on to the price of the property that is sold and ultimately borne by the purchaser. So I think it's very, very important that we look at the word district that is defined in the district plan as it stands at the moment, and also the fact that additional monies can be obtained for around that specific subdivision area. So can I have some feedback on that, please?
So just for clarity, you effectively, as an example, the 500,000 that's coming from Omar could just as easily be spent in Karamea or Mokanui as anywhere near Omar. Just, is that kind of what you mean? If that was the best place to spend it?
Well, according to the district plan, it says within the district.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can't argue with what's been out in the community since about, or whenever it was adopted. So that's what I'm seeing reading here, and I think we need to get some clarification on that because the policy is suggesting something different to the annual plan. To the district plan.
Okay, so if we start looking at part 8, the financial contributions, you've got 8.2, which is development contributions, not to be confused with what local government development contributions are. And in that section, 8.2, development is defined, and it is any activity other than basically residential. Developments of a value of over 500,000, so that's specific to those developments, not the subdivisions that we talk about, shall be subject to a financial contribution of 0.5%. The financial contribution shall only be spent by council on the provision of development of reserves, recreation facilities and community facilities within the district. That's 8.2, and that's development contributions. Those funds go into a different fund. They're called development contributions. And then it comes down to financial contributions as conditions of resource consent. So you've got the development contribution if you're over 500,000, or financial contributions as a condition of a resource consent. They're treated differently. And if all subdivisions are resource consents, so we come down to, we go through other financial contributions, such as electricity supply, street lighting, telephone links, get to 8.4.1.14, provision of open space, public recreation and other reserves. And the maximum, this is the purposes and circumstances for those funds, which are taken because people have subdivided over 10 allotments separate to the 500,000, to upgrade recreational space and other reserves with facilities for public recreation and enjoyment, or the protection of conservation values where subdivision results or will result in an increase or an intensification of use of the land, whether by increased resident population or by commercial and industrial activities. So that's where the reserve contribution fund is funded from. That's where the money from it comes from that particular 8.4.1.14. Further on in that, we also again decide that we have a thing called development contributions under 8.4.1.16. I'm sorry for this, it's really a lot of words. And this is for something different. Activities which involve considerable financing have the potential to greatly benefit the district. So these are for these developments which require resource consent. The first development contribution was for permitted activities, so no resource consent. And then we come down to this one. So if you have an activity that requires a resource consent, not only if you're a subdivision, but if you require a resource consent to make your development, development contributions are again required. So you don't get caught twice. Development contribution as a permitted activity, that's one section. But if you require a resource consent, you might also be required to provide a development contribution. Activities which involve considerable financing have potential to greatly benefit the district, but also put a strain on resources. Where a development is defined in 8.2, so that goes back to the permitted activity, additional contributions over and above that provided for, including reserves, may be required to provide for the social and recreational needs of the area in which the development is located. So there are three places: development contributions for permitted activities, and those are at the very beginning, and those go into the development contribution fund, which I think we were talked about in the
180,000, is that?
101,000. That's the reserve one. Yeah, I think it was, yeah, $118,000 is in the development contributions fund.
Yeah.
So, that is provided for permitted activities over 500,000 and also for resource consents over 500,000. In between those is this thing that we have for subdivisions only, and that's the money that we're talking about here, the reserve contribution fund. And that's where we get our lead from.
Around it being in the local.
For the protection of conservation, where the subdivision results or will result in an increase or intensification of use of land, whether by the increased resident population or commercial or industrial activities. So that's the part that where is the intensification going to happen? It's wherever, that's the interpretation.
That's where we're struggling with. How do you start defining this stuff?
Yeah.
You know,
Councillor,
and what are those
I'll go to Councillor Reedy, wrap this one up. Councillor Reedy?
If we can wrap it up, please, but I hear where Bronwyn's coming from, and it all comes back then to the long-term plan where policies, we have a financial and development policy. It's in the long-term plan, and it's quite clear in there that we do not have a development policy. We are focused solely on financial contributions, and that's what the policy was aimed for, and it's quite specific in that it talks about reserves and recreational facilities and what have you. But I need to go back and just make sure it talks about the district as opposed to the vicinity, if you like. So I'm just not sure of that. But I hear where you're coming from, Bronwyn, but we also have to take into account the long-term plan and the policy that we have, which is guided by legislation, the Local Government Act legislation. So we need to take that into account as well, not just the district plan.
Thanks, Colin. Simon?
Happy?
Yeah, just to clarify, our financial policy, contributions, financial policy talks about the district plan directing any development contributions or financial contributions. So it's the district plan that dictates that contribution factor. We don't say we don't take development contributions, but the district plan is the one that is the guiding light for it. And reflecting on the TTPP going forward, very clearly articulates that in quite detail.
So that explanation from Bronwyn is what I'm heading into about 2 weeks of, as we deliberate the final thing on the TTPP, all-day meetings talking about clauses and blah, blah. That's a big deal.
You're talking about the mechanism for all that, how you accumulate this stuff.
Yeah.
And, yeah. This is more about.
Yep. Okay, I think we should push on. What have we got? Carry on.
Just strategically, like to bring it into the big picture, what Colin was alluding to before is like exactly how I don't think this money should be used is if we're gathering $680,000 from OMAL, we shouldn't be putting that into the Waimang toilets. That's my personal opinion. That shouldn't be. I think the money that's gathered needs to be allocated roughly in that area to help enable more development. Hey, what if they want?
Yes.
But surely when the town planner is looking at, there's 20 houses in this block, what could we do to use that reserves contribution to make that land better for those people who have spent that money essentially? Because like we already have facilities in these other established parts of town and people choose to live there if they want based on what's there. I know that's a bit controversial, but that strategically, that's the bigger picture of where I would like it to be heading.
Joe?
We don't really have a choice. Legally, it's the principle of financial contributions is to cater for growth. It'd be very, very hard to justify, and I say somebody could legally go back and legally appeal to council if all this money collected OMAL was spent in Moroia, say, because it's collected for the purpose of being spent for the growth in that area. If it's not needed, then it shouldn't really be collected in the first place.
That's exactly where we're at.
And so I know in the past it annoyed me because we had to provide land and financial contributions, and we asked for across the road was a perfect place for people, open space for people to enjoy it, and we just asked for some money for landscaping. No, you couldn't have it. But to me, that was the purpose of what it was collected. And so, like the OMAL suggesting that some landscaping needed, surely you should start at the subdivision and move out. And to me, allowing 10% district-wide is being very generous. I think it sounds quite reasonable to spend it in that 25k, but some amounts like that OMAL, the subdivisions over there is going to be 10, 15, 30 years. It doesn't have to be sent tomorrow. It makes sense to me to pull some of those bigger projects you know are going to come up, but are still attributed to that growth.
Let's carry on with the slides, because it might answer a few more questions or stimulate some more conversation. It's quite interesting.
So basically what we did was we put together a draft policy for you to consider. and these were the questions. The purpose of the policy was the effective distribution of the reserve fund. The distribution, the principles that we were looking at was a percentage of the fund per year, location within 25 kilometres of the source, and the process will be 2 funding rounds, staff identify projects through the subcommittees, community groups, and reserve management plans and asset management plans. Staff collate and summarise, and then they advise the available fund balance, and council consider and approve or reject. So what we thought we would do, if this works for you, is to go through each of the principles, and at the end we might come up with, we don't need a policy. I'm happy with that. But if we do need a policy, the draft policy that we've put forward, we may take whole chunks out. So that's what we're going to talk you through now, if that's all right. So eligibility, I don't think it's really up for grabs too much, given that we have both the Resource Management Act and the district plan. So those are the things. I guess the only other thing was just clarifying through that legal advice we got, and which was attached to the original report, that it's definitely capital expenditure only.
I think we've got enough, isn't it? That's all pretty well defined elsewhere.
So, annual available fund.
Oh, to me, okay. Well, we talked about a percentage to spend. I think that was like the maximum. It wasn't, we've got X, we're going to spend 30% of it every year. It was like, you cannot spend more than, should that be 30%? Could it be 20 or 50? But these are just bargaining points, really. So, we would provide a report that said 1.6 million sitting in there. We've got 700,000 allocated to existing projects that haven't been completed yet, 900,000 available. If it's 30%, we can spend up to 300,000 in this financial year.
Deputy Mayor?
I think you should have personally, I think you should have a minimum where you don't go below it, but I don't think you should put a percentage about what you spend each year, because nothing's ever going to be cheaper than today. If you identify things today that are going to reduce rates or not increase rates, and they're going to be for the benefit of the community now, why would we stick to a formula that says in 10 years' time that 30% might be worth 15% just because we've had magic formula? I do think we should have a buffer, but I just think it should be based on needs, and it should be based on good reserve management plans and on the advice and the expertise of our council and our reserve subcommittees.
Mr. Grafton?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I don't get the 25k one. Like we've heard the talk about you either spending it and where it was accumulated, or what's the difference between 5k or 30k or 50k, or it's either you've had the 10% over for somewhere else, so it's either in that sourced area or it's for the district.
I think the reason we came to the 25k, which
we'll do next. We're going to do next.
I'll give an example of that when we get to that.
But 25k, you're talking distance, not money.
No,
Yes.
Distance.
So we're talking money.
25 kilometres.
So this one's about the money.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's tease out the point that, so at the moment, the proposal is suggesting 30%, up to 30% a year. The Deputy Mayor suggested rather than that, we go for a minimum balance to be maintained. Because there could be good reason why you might want to spend more than 30 in any given year. You might spend 5 the next year, whatever. What's just for direction? Is that something the table, which way does the table wanting to direct the policy? Obviously, they're going to draft this up. Joe?
It depends if we're going to go to these catchment areas. Are we going to collect the funds in a certain area? So if we're going to spend that area, it's not an overall fund, it's actually, you've got to look at each pocket and say what's perhaps needed and put aside, because some are going to vary quite a bit depending on the amount too. Some could sit at 0, whereas some I think we need a substantial amount put aside. So
you are quite right. The policy was written before we had that analysis of where it all been collected from. So But I mean, if you look at those smaller amounts, you know, there's, I think Charleston had like $18,000. You know, do you keep 10% of that aside, or because one thing might be 18,000? I think, yeah.
I think I think you come up with a plan rather than actually setting a policy you're gonna do.
Yeah.
So that comes into asset management or.
Rosie?
Yeah, I sort of disagree with the 25K kilometre area, but I think we should, just like Andrew said, have a minimum and probably 30% a year, basically what you've got there. And if you only take 100,000, it just means that the percentage goes down. The numbers go down, the percentage stays the same. So I'd sort of go along with a minimum amount of 100K. And
I think 100K is too light myself, but.
I agree.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm not going to argue about that, but minimum, yeah.
Alice?
I don't think there definitely needs to be a maximum, but I think there needs to be a bit of an explanation as to the intent of policy, and that, you know, it's not like we don't intend to use all of the money that's there as soon as we can, that the allowances for the multi-year programs or whatnot. It's not like a community grant application.
No,
We
not
want to
really.
use everything.
Yeah,
Like
no.
it needs to have that communication with it to say the purpose of that.
Councillor Edie?
Thank you. It comes back to what I was saying before, I'm sorry, and that is, it's all part of town planning. Now, here we are, asking or requesting that a developer pays a certain amount, and if we're looking at over 500,000, of course, we've got that amount there. Now, with town planning, of course, we should already know what we're going to do with this money, because it's not something that just sits in the bank and awaits something. We should, in terms of planning, understand what we're going to do with this money. And I'll be quite frank with you, if I was a developer or even a purchaser, I'd be up in arms having to pay for something that has not come to fruition. So it's not about having a monetary value or percentage value. It's about part of your planning process. And if we end up with no money, that's the whole idea of it. The fund, the contributions are there to satisfy whatever the town planning requirements are to accommodate new subdivisions. That's the only thing I've got to say on the matter. It's all about planning.
Thanks, Colin.
Yep.
Simon?
Obviously, the master planning plays an integral part. Obviously, there's quite a bit of work to actually lock down what that would look like in terms of a physical location for any future reserves. That's a future state. I think the critical thing here is the reserves management plans pretty well lead us down the path of where the investment should go to start with, optimise those to the best capacity that they need, without thinking about future reserves until we've got a lockdown master plan of where that would go. But you're right, Colin, town planning plays a big part in this.
So I'm not hearing a lot of argument for retaining a 30% per any given year thing. It sounds more like a minimum balance.
Yep.
So that there's always something in the kitty if opportunities pop up, rather than racing to get the money out the door or being too tight and not getting it out the door because, you know, you've got some arbitrary percentage. So we'll move on to the next one.
So this is the location distribution. So these are the options that we looked at: wards or some form of other good geographical area, distance from the source, or district wide.
Yeah, and so, sorry, Councillor Grafton asked about why 25 kilometres. Simon and I sat down with ArcGIS, and the big problem we have is places like Pinakaiki in particular, where we own very little land. So we only have the campground and virtually nothing else. Fox River's similar, Charleston's similar, where if you had a big development and one's proposed at the moment, and they wanted a playground apart from the Pinakaiki campground, we have nothing else. I mean, we've got that situation with the Pinakaiki community wanting a community centre. Where can we put it? That's the biggest challenge we have, and that will be the same for. You know, there could be rural developments that are quite a distance from town. Powerhouse Road's a classic. Owners, a classic. It's got proximity to the Omar domain. There's also there's Tauranga Bay, so there should be we'd be putting more stuff into Tauranga Bay as well. We just came up with 25 kilometres. Would that work? That on the next page, you got something to add to that?
So using that analysis, then the likes of Reefton, which doesn't seem to have generated hardly anything, then they're not going to see us hardly a cent, are they? So it doesn't really make.
Other than the 10% that's available to go. Well, you know, it's 10% the right number.
So I just don't get like 25k just doesn't to me make any sense whatsoever. It's either in the direct source or it's district wide.
Councillor Howard?
It is not a community fund though, it is a fund that's been raised from a developer or someone that subdivides to cater for the growth in that area that they've caused. It's not a kitty for people to dip in for their wish list. Yeah.
But I guess to pick up on Brent's point though, if the big development happens in an area and there is no land and it's determined actually we're going to claim this money off you, but there's no obvious thing we're going to invest in within Kiwi of your development, then what do we do? Because if the policy says you're going to do it next to the development, then do you not charge them? Or do you charge them and then you've got money you can't distribute?
That was our attempt at defining what is the area.
Yeah. So let's say a theoretical, the one that's potentially on the cards down at Punakaiki, be quite a big development by the sound of it. It'd be a reasonable number come out of that from a contributions point of view. But if there's no playgrounds or no land that we own, whatever, and then, well, I mean, the team might be scratching their head as to what would we spend that on within, say, 5k of the development.
So the other thing is that it can be used by council to purchase a piece of land in an area that doesn't have a reserve at the moment. So we could technically purchase a piece of land in the middle of or nearby the development and then develop a reserve. I don't think we would ever not actually ask for it, because that would be us saying that you're not going to have any impact. We know there will be an impact if the development comes through and there is X amount of money available. Then we may well go and look for a piece of land that we could develop a reserve on or a public open space.
Yep. Okay, Simon.
Just to remind councillors that we do encourage developers to put aside land to dedicate as reserves, particularly the large developments. They would create a reserve for the residents they're building for. So that is another way that'll offset financial contributions in the first place. So if there is a large scale development, we would encourage that in the planning stage to actually include that as part of a process.
Councillor Fowler.
Just following up on the Reefton thing, should the reserves contribution money be going to Reefton at all if there's no development there? Because I don't think it should be. If there's enough development there to justify them having money in their kitty to then put towards playgrounds, then yes. But if there's no development in Reefton, there shouldn't be any reserves management money going there in the first place.
Deputy Mayor.
I think we also need to remember that this is not the only amount of money that the council works with. No, the council works with maintenance money all the time, and they have capital money, and they have other buckets of money which support communities. This is just one particular parcel of money around reserves, and I 100% agree. It should be to enhance the people that pay the money.
Yeah.
First and foremost, because that's why they pay the money.
Okay, any changes on that then? So my hearing, it's pretty much as close as practicable to the development.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing?
These are our first parts that are. Yeah.
So the 25% is reasonable? No?
So, okay.
I don't agree with the 25Ks because I just sort of see anomalies. It's the whole district, and you could turn around and just take Karamea, for instance, 25Ks of Karamea or Little Wanganui and where the 25K of Little Wanganui sort of fit in. It's up on the bluff and yeah, it's a smaller area that can be sort of worked through. Same. Yeah, no, I just think the district and maybe, yeah.
Simon?
And just the easiest way to manage that is change those two numbers down below. You could create a 30-70 or 60-40 to spread across. So focus being locally or where it was sourced from and the rest balanced out.
I think, yeah, I'm hearing the reality from the smaller communities, but I think Deputy Mayor raises a good point though, is that this is just one little bucket of funding that council has. And it would just simply mean council has to fund its
Yeah.
obligations in those communities where there hasn't been any development another way.
And the fact that we're using it for the local, for those means that we don't have to use it there. The ratepayer funded part of council's funding is more available because we haven't, we've used this fund in this place.
I think also to bring it back, so was that very clearly in the beginning of that policy, it says, and it's prescriptive from government, can only be spent on new capital items on BBC owned land. So it's not for repairs and maintenance. Those assets that already exist in other communities are not going to be, they're still going to be maintained under our repairs and maintenance budgets. And then we still have capital in our parks and reserves as well for other things.
I don't support personally. I mean, I can only speak for I don't support an full open district wide. I think you should honour the purpose for what you've collected it, which is as close as practical to the impact that development's causing. I mean, I'm comfortable with a 10% district wide though. I don't like the 25K. So I think 90 related to the development of 10 district wide because there are flow on effects just generally to a district as it grows that don't necessarily directly relate to it, but that'd be my view.
So what's the 90 million?
Oh, it's got to be directly related to what it's collected from, I suppose says.
I think what you just said about the most practical local area, that captures it.
As close as practical to the source.
But don't define it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Andrew?
You know, when I look at that 1.6 million that's available, 75% of it is from Omau and Westport. But at the moment, 0% of it is being used for budgeted for Omau and Westport. And if you're a Westport Omau resident and you saw that, you may think, actually, why do we bother paying it?
Yeah.
Just thought.
I think there might be merit, something's really, really big one that are contributing significant amounts is probably worthy of a discussion at that stage, you know, with the community developer and council about what's the best use of that money. That's for these really big ones.
Yeah, I think that would be our intent, certainly with that Omau one, that we just come in, is to sit down with the developer and say, well, what aspirations do you have? It might be too early. It might be wait till those sectors are sold and people have actually started moving in, you get a feel for the demographics, you know. But you know, I don't think it'll be isolated staff in an office going, we're going to build a super water slide off the top of the.
So, given we're not making decisions in a workshop, so how are we going to bring this? How are we going to incorporate this feedback? Because I think we have got quite mixed views here.
So we would have options.
Okay.
We'll bring back options, which would include all the options that we've talked about, district wide.
Okay.
Set, and then some pros and cons, but then up to we would slot that into the policy at the end. Whatever was voted.
Okay, Tony.
I'm just a little bit concerned, I suppose at the end of the day, because this fund hasn't been used properly and areas have missed out over the years, now we've got this new, like, I can just see people actually missing out because there's money has been collected, hasn't been spent in the correct manner. And
we can reverse track, can we? Can we reverse track and find out where that money came from? Each of them you've done. Yeah, so we can do that. Yeah, so there might be a wash up situation where the first year perhaps we are using that in a particular way, but would not going forward, we'd be looking forward rather than back. Does that work?
Yeah, I think because it's going to come down to just a debate and a vote at the end of the day.
Yep.
There's some fundamental, people have got a fundamental view that it's nuts that you'd be pinging a developer in Omar for toilets in Mokanui.
Yep.
And there's other councillors who rightfully have the view that it should be open to whatever's the next cab off the rank in the district. And then there's all the in between.
Yeah, so we'll put all those in the report with, and then at the end of the day, we'll put it together as a policy.
Sounds good.
The next one is about process around the funding. So as you saw from the kaipara, they had a fully contestable. It wasn't that they were going to use all their reserve contribution in this process, but it was just an indication. So this fully contestable with the public coming in and giving their requests, the community and staff, so 50-50 value, which becomes quite complicated, or staff to allocate based on the reserve management plans, capital projects, etc. So what did we do, Brent?
What did we do? We went basically 50-50, more or less, was staff could put forward projects that fit within our asset management plans, reserve management plans, or we can accept applications from the community. That could be.
I guess
I think that's
from our point of view, I think the administration of the of going with a contestable round was quite daunting. And it actually takes away money from when we wouldn't be able to use the reserve contribution fund to fund the process of going out for grants with the public advertising and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think we were lending also towards more the staff based on the reserve management plans, the discussions that we have, the subcommittee liaison officer, and the discussions that our people in the field have every day with
It was
with
more
people.
an attempt for us to have, well, for the council to have basically veto rights, so that staff just can't run wild.
Yep.
We've got some rigor and some discipline, but we also have to be accountable. You know, if this is going to get across the line, then we have to be an argument that's strong enough for council to support. That was all.
Rosie, you were first.
But any proposal would come back to council.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
It would
Everyone.
We wouldn't be able to spend a cent around
Proceed
council resolution, so.
Yes.
And it's a little bit around the, you know, do we do 2 rounds or not? Well, maybe the answer is that I still believe we need that opportunity to come to council
Outside.
outside the LTP annual plan process, and maybe it's September. And I accept that we could come to you at any point, if it's an urgent. But do you really want that sort of stuff dribbling in? I thought that if we had a plan and a focused, paper that said, here are 10 things we want to do. These are the reasons why, rather than here's one we did in September and it's October and we've got another little one for 5,000. The next month we'll provide another one for 50.
Yeah.
That was all.
Joe?
2 points. One is just, if we go to that staff from the reserve management plans, just a mechanism for picking up some of those things that don't fit within the odd ones that don't fit within the management plans, how that's going to work.
Yes, so we should have asset management plans in there as well.
Yeah.
So
And
reserve
and
management,
community, maybe community plans.
Yeah.
Or some.
but that should come out during the public consultation as well,
Yeah.
with the reserve management plans. So that those
Or picking up
because
the annual plan process.
yes.
The other thing was, it probably, given there's a lot in this, we probably should have a 6-monthly report to council anyway around the asset management and the plans. So maybe that's a good opportunity then to bring forward any expenditure, proposed or?
Yeah, so the asset management plan is like, which you hadn't had for, I thought it was 2018, actually goes back to Thursday, and so about 2015, so we're 10 years overdue. But that would lay out 10 years worth of capital and programs.
So like, is it going to come back to council, as we're going to have a more than once a year on what's happening with all the reserves and open spaces,
Yes,
so.
you would have your annual plan process
Annual
with the
plan.
LTV stuff and adopted and the asset management plan sit
Yeah,
behind.
and so we probably need a review of how that work's going during the year, so maybe that's also, be having that reporting period would be the opportunity to bring up any other
wouldn't they then-
expenditure.
Sorry to interrupt, but then once these projects are approved, they're all capital projects, they'll come through in your capital works report
Yeah.
from, Jess. So because they'll all form versions of capital projects out and about in the district, so they'll be reported on through that mechanism, like all the other capital work. Colin.
Thanks. Just regarding the that section that we've got 3.1, the business about the thing about coordinating the pilot list of projects for each 6 months period. I hear what Brent was saying, but unfortunately, when we do an annual plan, we should be looking ahead to what we're going to be, what we'll be spending money on, both capex and opex. So to suggest that after 6 months, i.e. December, January of each term, of each financial year, that we then bring forward another list of projects that we're going to do. These should all be in the in the annual plan, consulted on with the community each year. So I'd like to see that piece taken out. We report on a regular basis, as you said, Jamie, with the capex that comes through, capex reports that come through from Jess. So it's not each 6 months; it's just on a regular basis.
The only other way, I hear what Colin's saying, and I kind of agree with him. But the only thing that doesn't capture is the things that pop up in terms of these funding rounds that you don't really know about. But to cover that off, I'm wondering, is there not you do an annual list that says this is the annual list and this is how we're funding it, and you have another half a dozen things that say this are also on our list but currently unfunded. And then if they, so they're just there, they're visible, everyone knows what the next cab is. Here's your top 6, here's your next 6. And then that deals with the looking ahead thing. So you do know what these projects are, but you don't know how you're going to fund them.
It's the unexpected.
Yeah, and then if a funding round comes up during the year, then actually you could allocate, because it's been transparent. They were on the list, they were unfunded. Now there is a funding avenue, and you want to go for it. Is that how?
Yeah, that would be part of it. The other part would be those unexpected. Something has broken big time, and we can't wait 12 months to get in front of the annual plan. Although I suspect we can come back to council.
Yeah. That'll be
Oh,
a repair.
I'm thinking swing bridges collapsing into rivers and things.
Yeah. Colin, just before we lose
Yeah.
too much shape, what did you think of that suggestion from your accounting point of view?
Oh, the hitting the nail on the head was good there, Jamie, because you said that we have it. It's part of the planning process that we need to do. Look at some capex items or projects, but we don't have the funding for them. But at least they're in there, as you said before, about transparency. It's there. We know that they have to be done, but we can't do them because we don't have the funding. So fully agree with that. But there's a bit too much emphasis at the moment on emergency type work that we need to do. That's always around anyway. We can't plan for emergencies and or urgent work, and therefore that to me is a given.
Yeah, and just means we have to fund them somewhere else. Still a
Yeah,
payment
or
council.
we come to you, as a one-off to account for a resolution to access the fund.
Yeah, that's fine. Anyone else have something on this before we move on?
The next part is very general, just looking at some of the bigger picture stuff. So I think, do you feel like we've got the basis for for writing this down as a policy, bring it back to council with the options and,
I
then
think
we'll
so.
go from there.
I think what I'm hearing from this section is around, I think our preference is annual.
Yep.
But for some visibility on the things that we know are coming that we don't yet
Yep.
think fit in the budget. So there's visibility on the kind of what's next.
And,
That's great.
and we then have permission to come at any other time.
Yeah.
With stuff that we believe fits the purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was unplanned.
Yeah.
But an opportunity.
And, yeah.
Yeah.
And they may be opportunities that we only find because suddenly some co-funding becomes available.
Yeah.
Rather than an emergency, but it may be that there might be a fund available that we could tap
So
into.
we've got to find that way of council being nimble, because
Yes.
otherwise you just
Yes.
miss stuff.
Yep.
So you've got to be able to be nimble, but in a transparent way somehow, so that it's not just like looking reactive.
Stealth.
Tony,
Again, this is with those reserve management.
Yep.
Plans coming in, it's just, if we're gonna have a whole lot of things that we need from the list,
Yeah.
pretty much, yeah.
go.
And I think just somewhere in it capturing when we're collecting the money to look at those immediate needs moving sort of outwards, so identifying, working.
So we will
Around them.
maintain that spreadsheet going forward of what's being collected. That spreadsheet you have, it doesn't exactly balance, but it's within a false law. So we'll just keep maintaining that, adding on where it was collected, what's been spent in each area, and that we'll report that. As annual plan, LTP, and whenever we bring anything to council for, we'll be able to tell you what we're spending, what was collected in that area and what's now
It'd be
available.
quite good also, Nick, because we've got to relate it back to the growth and the intensification. It'd be quite good in some cases to put what has that development caused an intensification, what's the different things, is it like, is there particularly access in that area, or if it's some particular issues that subdivisions caused or related to, it'd be really nice to record
Yeah.
that.
But most of the implications of development are mostly fall on infrastructure like roading, water, waste, etc. But it's that
Collection,
that's a different fund.
Yeah.
And it's how do we, are people at Cape Bell struggling to find places to walk or walk their dogs or whatever, and do we need to provide something for that?
Pretty hard to measure. You
It's
could tie yourself up in knots trying to
and
measure that
it's
stuff.
really hard at the moment because that development's occurring, hasn't occurred, it's not populated. So we don't really understand, but a lot of those, that we know, for instance, along Lighthouse Road and, particularly around Omar, that's going to be quite intensive housing. So the domain will need some money spent
I
on
think
it.
we know from that future bullet though, when we looked at the areas, and what's important to people, they quite clearly said the different things like the pathways and the trees for shelter, or just and the environment was a big part of it. I think we need to recognise those studies that have already been carried out.
Grossly.
Well, that's for the bigger subdivisions, but there's little ones, just like I've just done, and it's got no impact whatsoever. You've got a Tarshill Road already, and so I'm just one, and there must be many more of, 7.5, 10 grand just flipping into here with no effect on, and no impact on the district at all.
Yeah, but everyone says that though, and then if I take my road, for example, like as a kid growing up, there were 3 dairy farms up there, virtually no traffic. It was a gravel road. And now we're the only farm left, everyone's subdivided. And so every one of them individually say, well, I'm only one more house and it's only me and mum, it's one more car, but there's like 80 houses up there now. So cumulatively, they do make a difference. There's people on the road walking and jogging and push on rams and no footpaths, no street lighting, not that I want it, but
No water, no wastewater.
yeah. So small ones that add a lot to the district over time. But you can't, and to Joe's point, you can't put your finger on it and say, well, actually my subdivision meant that we had to have an extra parking bay at the library. But some of those people will be coming to town and using the library. Yeah.
So, all good? So I'll just wrap up with some just general considerations with the S underneath. Just so that we know the basis on which we're working moving forward. Reserve management plan is underway. There'll be full consultation with the public, and there will be hearings and adoption by council. That'll set the direction and the goals for each, for the big picture for recreation and reserves in the district, and also for each reserve, high level goals, objectives. Then there'll be asset management and operational plans, which will come out of the reserve management plans and provide for ongoing development and upgrading. We've got the reserves and halls subcommittees who are making requests for projects now. We would still make council aware of all those projects, obviously, and opportunities, even if they're not specifically included in the plans above. So that will all be coming back to you. Community feedback, stakeholders such as sports clubs, that's ongoing with our staff on the ground and out in the field. Co-funding opportunities are available, and I think we're more and more actively looking for those now to fund projects. And previous or current projects in the vicinity, it's important not to duplicate work. So if somebody's done something somewhere, those are the sort of things that we would consider when we brought them back to you. And that's it.
Thank you. Councillor Reedy, closing thoughts?
Very well summed up. Yeah, very well summed up. And I just want to refer to the 3.2 in the draft plan or policy, 3.2B, adding capacity and not limited to and so on. But they talk about adding public toilets and stuff like that. I think we also need to be aware that we've got something coming forward early next year regarding public toilets and stuff like that. So, but then I'm looking at even barbecue seats and signage and stuff like that. Exactly what the sort of thing, maybe petty cash, but sometimes we're paying for these out of the community grants. Well, in actual fact, you might recall Carter's Beach, for example. So we're actually tying it down. Thank you, Belinda. Sorry. Thanks for all of that in terms of bringing those in. So I'm relaxed about the whole thing in that regard, so long as we've taken into account what we said earlier on regarding the expenditure and radius and what have you.
Thanks, Colin.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Joe, closing thoughts?
I know we can pick up halls and everything like that, but can we pick up any capital upgrades or anything for like the library and the theatre? Why not?
No,
Because
it's prescriptive open space.
Yeah.
or
It's got to be recreation, open space.
but if it was the development contributions, they can be community facilities, and that was the right one.
Yeah.
Okay, councillors, we'll pull that to a close. Now, we had grants down for 3:30. Do we want to move that forward a bit? Yes. Okay, so if we have a wee break now, we'll come back. It's a workshop, so it's not advertised we're not held to a start time. It has been advertised at 3:30. So anyone who is watching, we'll come back at about 3:05. We'll have a 20-minute break.